Hello everyone, my name is Anna and I welcome you guys back to another English video for our series called Studies of the Brit Hadashah, where we're going to be focusing on chapter 22 from the Gospel of Matthew. And the title corresponding to this chapter is What is from the world to the world and what is from the eternal to the eternal. Starting off with verses 1 through 14, we are going to be reading about the parable of the wedding banquet, where we will learn that the main message of this parable is that many are called, but few are chosen. And we are going to reach this conclusion because throughout this parable, we're going to be seeing that it shows us who are truly worthy to inherit the kingdom of heaven, which is not about possessing goods in large quantities, but quite the opposite. We will be seeing that the true believer can only inherit the kingdom of heaven by being worthy of it, and this is through their actions. Verses 1 through 7 of chapter 22, Yeshua starts speaking to his disciples the following. Yeshua spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants and said, 'Tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened cattle have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized his servants, ill-treated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city." These verses that we have just finished reading begin to relate that the king organizes a large event, which was a wedding banquet for his son. Within this parable, the king makes reference to the eternal and the son makes reference to Yeshua, who, as we have been studying throughout these gospels, or this gospel of Matthew, Yeshua is the only begotten son of the Creator. In this parable, we can read that the king sends his servants to invite people who had proven to be unworthy of attending this event. And the reason why these people were unworthy of attending this event was because, as we have read, when they were invited to attend this event, they denied the invitation. But however, on the contrary, or on the other hand, we can also see that some of these guests not only denied the king's invitation, but also the servants or messengers that the king had sent to give these people the invitation for this event, they were mistreated and even murdered by the people who were unworthy of attending this wedding banquet. These servants of the king that are being mentioned within these verses make reference to the prophets of the eternal in the times of the kings, where we will be seeing later on that the eternal sends these prophets as messengers for the people of Israel. But however, these people, because they had a hard heart, they did not want to listen, they did not want to obey. Not only did they not obey the prophets of the eternal, but they also denied them and even killed them. As we can see it happen in this parable, that these people that were invited to this wedding banquet, not only did they not accept the invitation, but they also murdered the servants of the king. Due to this action that these people do, we can read within these verses that as a consequence to those actions, the king orders that these cities of those people had to be burned. They had to be destroyed. And this action of the king is pointing to the invasion of Jerusalem by Rome in the year 70, because as I had mentioned before, the people of Israel had already forgotten their creator, and they had also killed the creators or the eternal's prophets, which is why, due to that bad action that the people of Israel did, The consequence for their actions was that the Eternal brought judgment to them, which was that they would be invaded by Rome. Continuing with this parable, verses 10 to 17 says, "So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, the bad as well as the good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man who was not wearing wedding clothes. He asked, 'How did you get in here without wedding clothes?' The man was speechless. Then the king told the attendants, 'Tie his hands and foot and throw him outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are invited, but few are chosen.'" Here in these verses that we just finished reading, we can see that since the first guests, not only did they reject the invitation that the king was giving them to attend this event, they were also unworthy of attending this event. The king, because of this, orders his servants to go to the streets of that city to find people who could attend this wedding banquet. It is said that the servants managed to fill up this event with guests, but when the king came down to this wedding banquet, he found a person who was not dressed appropriately for the wedding. This caused the king to remove him from this party. In this, we can learn that both the first guest and the second guest, both of them were invited to be at this celebration. However, both of them ended up not being worthy of attending it, since the first person, not only did they not accept the invitation, but they also murdered the king's servants. And also in the second person, or the second guest, they did accept the invitation, but they attended it dressed in the wrong way. It is important for us reading these verses to also understand that the reason why the second person was removed from the wedding was not simply because he was not wearing the appropriate clothes physically, but because that action that this person did was a greater meaning in life. In other words, since the clothes that this person took to attend this wedding banquet, it had to be clean. It had to be clean, which makes an allusion to the purification that the blood of the Messiah does when someone cleans their garments with the blood of the Messiah. So this is the reason why we see the importance that this person, or the people who attend the person who attended this wedding banquet, had to be dressed with the appropriate clothes, which was, its clothes had to be clean. They had to be whitened. In Revelation 7 verse 14, we can read the following. "I answered, 'Sir, you know,' and he said, 'These are they who have come out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb.'" In this parable, we can learn the importance that as believers, we must ensure that our clothes are always clean, since the scripture says that those who wash their clothes with the blood of the perfect Lamb are blessed to have the right to the tree of life, and are also, they can enter through the doors of the heavenly city. But on the contrary, if our garments are stained by sin, rebellion, assimilation, etc., then we will have the same end as these two guests, which is to be despised by the Eternal because of our actions that were not worthy for the Eternal. From verses 15 to 22, we can read that Yeshua speaks about the tribute to Caesar. And this theme about the tribute to Caesar arises from a question that the disciples of the Pharisees asked Yeshua, which was, "Is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar or not?" This question that the disciples of the Pharisees gave or made towards Yeshua was one more test for Yeshua that he had to face by the religious people. and not only the religious people, but also by the followers of Herod, also known these people as Herodians. And these people were people who agreed in everything with Herod, who in turn was accountable to Rome, and therefore Rome, the empire of capitalism. So, seeing the responsibility that Herod had, it gave rise to greed, and not only greed but also the love towards the money, which, as we have already studied before, it attributes to the god Mammon, something that, as we have studied, is disapproved of by the words of Yeshua that we can find in Matthew 6 verses 24 to 34, which talks about not serving two gods, because we will end up loving one more than the other. In short, we can see within these verses that Yeshua once again answers them with wisdom, and most importantly based on the scriptures, that they must give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and what is the eternal's to be given to the eternal. The reason why this response from the Messiah was a wise one was because if Yeshua had answered no, then that would make him a revolutionary. That is, that he would become an enemy of the Romans, since his response would be considered that people must not pay their taxes. But on the other hand, if Yeshua had answered yes, then he would be considered as a traitor to his community. And this was because since the Pharisees, once they heard Yeshua's response, upon knowing what he had responded, they would only have to publish it to the rest of the Jewish people, and this was going to cause the loss of the followers of Yeshua the Messiah. So that is why, reading this response that Yeshua gave towards the Pharisees, he makes it clear that he is not serving the power of Rome, but on the contrary, he is being faithful to the Eternal Father. From verses 23 to 33, we can read that it talks about within these verses about a very important topic for the religions of that time, which was regarding to the theme of resurrection. This topic arises because we read that the Sadducees, who were members of the upper class of Jewish society at that time, come to Yeshua to ask him if resurrection exists, with which Yeshua answers that it does exist. And Yeshua says this because biblically we can see that this theme about resurrection happens with some biblical characters, such as the prophets, or even we can see it in the miracle that Paul did with the young man named Elchis, and even with Yeshua himself, who, after giving his life as a perfect sacrifice, or the perfect lamb, on the third day he resurrected from the dead. Now, the reason why the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection was because, according to their religious belief, they only took into account what the Torah would say, and they would forget about the prophets, which is why it is considered that they denied the immortality of the soul, and therefore they denied the resurrection. This question that the Sadducees asked Yeshua was only for the purpose of him falling into a trap, which was to contradict himself. But with reading the response, or how Yeshua or how the Messiah responded to this question of the Sadducees, he not only responded them wisely, but he also responded them according to what it says in the Torah, and according to what it says in the Torah, making it clear that it's not his own words, but it's to what according they can find within the scriptures. Continuing with verses 34 through 40, we can read that Yeshua talks about the first and great commandment for which every believer must obey. And the reason why Yeshua talks about the great commandment was because it was a question that the religious people asked Yeshua. So Yeshua, the first commandment that he mentions, within these verses, and also that we can find within the Torah, specifically in Deuteronomy 6 verses 4 and 5, which says the following: "You shall love the eternal your Elohim with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind." So this commandment is known as the Shema Israel, also known as Listen Israel, where in that time that it was said, the Eternal was addressing it to the people of Israel about the importance of loving the Eternal, or their Elohim, with all of their being. And for this reason, it is why Yeshua mentions that as believers today, it is also important to keep this commandment in mind, and also put it into practice. The second commandment that Yeshua speaks of is love your neighbor as yourself. It is important to mention that just because Yeshua mentions that these two commandments are the great commandment, it does not mean that the rest of the commandments that we can find within the Torah must not be obeyed. But however, what Yeshua was referring when he said that these two are the great commandment is because he was referring to the fact that all the other commandments arise from these two bases, which is love the Eternal with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and to also love your neighbor as yourself. And it is important that as believers, we fulfill these two commandments and all the rest of the commandments in our lives. Something that we can learn from these two commandments that Yeshua mentions within these verses is about the importance of understanding that Yeshua was referring, or what he was referring to when he mentions the word love. Since humanly, or according to the world, when we say the word love, right away we think of an emotion or about a feeling or selfishness or any other type of human reaction or human emotion. But within the scriptures, when the word, or in this case when Yeshua says or mentions the word love, he is referring to the obedience to our Creator. Additionally, we must always consider what John wrote in 1 John 3 verse 18 that says, "Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth." So, with this, we understand that these two commandments that Yeshua mentions are really important for the true believer to fulfill, as well as the other commandments that we can find within the scriptures. And well, that is all for today's video, a really short chapter. I hope you guys had learned something, and if you have any comments or any questions, you can leave them down in the comment section down below. Once again, thank you very much for your time, and we will see each other in the next one.